I'm Anna, the Yarn Randomizer, and this is episode 9 in this nice warm August. Actually, just a moment. So you don't have to have the hum of the air conditioner going the entire time. I'll have that off. But at least it's a little cooled off in the room right now. I'd like to welcome new viewers and returning viewers. I hope you've been enjoying my little videos. I've been putting up shorts of when I pick my Yarn Randomizer choices out of my little bucket of wooden chips that picks randomly from my stash. And I hope you've enjoyed those. And oh yeah, you can find me on Instagram as original.annasender. And you can hear the motorcycle going by outside. Oh well. And was it on Ravelry? I am the Yarn Randomizer on Ravelry as well. And so if you like, please like and subscribe if you want to see these keep coming. And we'll just get right into it and go into what's going on. Oh, and a quick reminder, how I pick yarns. I mentioned the wooden chips. I have a bucket of wooden chips with numbers on them. And so I have my husband pull a chip every so often to figure out what yarn I'm going to work with from my stash. And most of my projects are Yarn Randomizer projects. I do other ones occasionally for different reasons, but mainly that's what I work on. So, oh, and I was supposed to be wearing this. I have them peeking over at my notes every so often, but I was supposed to be wearing this at the start of this podcast. And this is the mystery wool along that was done by Bare Naked Wools, and you can see that. And it turned out so nice. Let me hold it out for you here. I got it blocked, and it's really a good size, and it turned out really beautifully. You can see all the detail there and how well it blocked out. And I got it all woven in and everything. And they finally actually have a name instead of mystery wool along. This is called the Haplander shawl. And so I think there are actually still kits on Bare Naked Wools for this. And a lot of people actually knitted not just a triangle, but a big square of this, which turned out really nice. Now, if I've gone over all this before, I apologize. I was just still excited about how this had turned out and how well it ended up. But definitely recommend Bare Naked Wools and their kits and giving those a try. But it was a really fun experience. But I'll set that aside because it is definitely still too warm to be wearing a shawl in here or a heavy sweater or anything like that. Now, see, so I'm going to be peeking at my notes every so often. So the mystery wool along, that'll be the last time I talk about it unless you happen to see me wearing it for another episode when the weather gets a little cooler. And so I wanted to get into finished objects. Now my first finished object is going to be a little bit of a cheat. Let's see. I always like to show my Jimmy Beans wool annual shawl as a I finished it for July. And so we got the July colorway, and I'm trying to remember what this colorway is, but there we go. So the latest color in the fade is this one, and let me bring that up really quickly. Projects in my notebook. And all my projects are always in my Ravelry page. So anything you want to see as far as my stash, my projects, all that stuff, it's all there. And let's see, the latest colorway is, oh, that's right, Totoro and May, which is from My Neighbor Totoro, which is a really neat movie. Little anime kind of Japanese movie, kids movie that I've always liked, and I like most of those, just about all of those movies from that Studio Ghibli. So the latest one is that colorway, so you can see it went from the kind of intense yellow, yellows with grays, gray, you know, more gray and yellow, and then verging into the pink. And then this one that starts bringing, kind of going mostly pink with speckling and white in there. And then this one that was mostly pink last month, and then kind of coming back to a mixture of colors. And again, still mostly pink though. Maybe that's kind of a gray that's in there. I don't know. But yeah, it's turning out really nice. So this whole thing will be a fade for the year. So it's a little over halfway done now. And it's my little fun thing. Each month I get the 80 yards of yarn and the next section. This year is different from a lot of years in that you're knitting almost the identical piece. Each month is just about the same. And so you're just mainly doing this little band in a different colorway. And I think some people would prefer that it's kind of different every month. For me, my knits, a lot of my knits are kind of complicated, and so it's actually kind of nice. This is a little bit of a break each month, and last year's shawl was pretty intense, the annual shawl. So this is kind of nice for that reason too. But the colorways are so nice, and it's La Bien Ami merino singles that they're using in this, and it's just turning out really nice and stuff. So, and the bag, if you notice the bag, this is a bag. I have a couple of theirs. You'll see another one right here. These are from Stitching Plaza, which I'll link below. And I really like their bags. Very simple, nicely lined, drawstring. They're just incredibly convenient for carrying around. So that is the Jimmy Beans wool. Now to some really finished objects. Yes, okay. So I'm gonna bring in something a little random here. I have a hat. This is one of my husband's mini hats. He has a, they don't all fit on the shelf. We have a shelf and a kind of a narrow bookshelf, and it has pegs on each side and shelves inside, and it's filled with hats, multiple hats on each shelf and hats hanging off the side and everything. And this is just one of the mini hats that he has. And don't be mistaken. My husband is not a state trooper or anything, or a national park attendant, although he might like that job. He just loves hats. And he is actually, I can't remember if I'd mentioned this before, but he is a pastor actually for a church. But he has got a substantial collection of hats. Now, this does look somewhat official. And so the idea was for me to make a hat band for him to wear with the hat to kind of soften the look a little bit. So what I did was I took some Croy sock yarn, and the colorway of that was Mexicali stripes, and I knitted just a kind of a flat tube. It's just 10 stitches wide, and I knitted that on, I think, size 4 needles. And so I think it turned out really nicely. Anybody else might need to use size 3. It actually ended up a bit thicker and plumper than I expected it to be as a fingering yarn. But yeah, it turned out really nice. And I did have to cut out, there were some sections of the yarn where the color went on for a long time. And you see some of these are longer. They probably would have been at least twice as long in some cases if I hadn't cut out some of the yarn. So there were a lot of snips of yarn cut out of this. So I've got a funny jumble of leftovers of this yarn. But I'm really happy with how it turned out. I haven't actually blocked this yet. I have to soak it, and that'll probably even up the stitches a little bit. But I was going to slide it on this hat so you can get an idea how that ends up looking. That looks pretty neat. So that's how it turns out. And so yeah, so I was really happy with how that turned out. All the instructions for this are in my page. I Kitchenered the two ends together, so you really can't see a seam on this and everything. But yeah, I'm just thinking maybe better's one layer just back and forth instead, but that would make it a lot slower. Knitting it as a tube I thought was a lot easier. I just used 2 circulars to do that. But I'm really happy with how that turned out. And you can see the link below and kind of how I have instructions on how I made it. But yeah, and this was a fun, good August project to do everything, but it turned out really nice. So set that there. Now, the next thing I finished, I was doing, what I did was I went through my list of items in my queue and I picked out a bunch of smaller projects just to kind of just get them done. Because I was kind of in the mood for lighter weight stuff and just stuff to kind of work through. So one of the other items I had in my list was a mason jar cozy that I've made before, and I had some leftovers of some the fiber seed. They're sprout worsted to use, and I used those together and it came out really nice, and I'll put a photograph here. The reason I don't have it with me is because it's currently in my husband's truck and on its way into Pennsylvania, where he's going to pick up a workshop table for a lathe. So, but obviously what happened was I showed him that I had finished this cozy. I had it sitting out and he was saying, can I use that? And so I had not anticipated that he would ask to have that cozy. Well, he's got it now. And so it's been on his glass, his tall mason jar glass, for a few days now. I still have the old one that I have here. And this is DK. I used a worsted there, but I used the same size needle. It pretty much worked up the same. And so it makes a nice way to keep condensation off the sides of the glass and everything. Now, and you can see the neat, I don't know how well you can see it with this variegated, it has a nice bottom with it kind of the stitches spiraling out and the increases or decreases as it turns out. Now, the thing I did different with the pattern was, because I had such a limited amount of yarn to work with, and you can see in the photo, I'll put it back up there again, you can see in the photo that it doesn't go all the way up the glass. I wanted to get as much length as possible out of it. And so what I decided to do was I decided to work it from the bottom up. And so that meant doing a pinhole cast on. And then instead of course, decreases, I'm doing increases. And so I basically work the pattern completely backwards. So the number of stitches you end with is what I started with. And then I did increases at the same rate as described for decreases and worked out to the outer edge and then worked up straight. And I basically did the bottom in the solid brown color wenge from the fiber seed, and then used all the hawthorn that I had, and then switched back to the wenge and did just a 1x1 rib for the upper area of it. It turned out really nice. It sits very well on the bottle. I blocked on the cup, and I blocked it on the cup as well. So it turned out really well. And so, but yeah, it's out in the wilds of Pennsylvania right now, out in the field, so to speak. So that turned out really well. And again, it's quick. I think I knit that. The hat band took me a couple of days, but that I knit in a day. And then I decided to use another little leftover project that I had in my queue. And that was an Elizabeth Zimmerman project. Was it Christmas Fiddle Faddle is what the chapter is. It's from the Knitter's Almanac. And so this is one of the patterns that she has for August, for small things to knit in hot weather. And so it turned out pretty nicely. So you knit this, you actually graft it together down the middle. So you knit these spines for each, or the kind of branches for each side. You do some short rows and add the bottom part of it, and then you graft it down through the center. And so I think it turned out, I haven't blocked it yet, so I'll probably wet it and spread it out, and might put some starch in there. Let's keep the computer awake there. Might put some starch in there to kind of make it a little stiff for an ornament. And yeah. So it turned out really neat. It was a cute way to use up the yarn. I only had enough to make one, and the rest of it goes into, I have a container of scraps of yarn that are too small to do anything with. Actually, let me grab that right now, and I'll show you. All right. So I have this container, and here's the leftover of that very green itself and some other, I can't even begin to, trying to think of which yarn that is. That's left over from some other project. But those, I stuffed those in here and used this for provisional cast-ons and things like that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I would do with it. But also it's kind of a little decorative. Maybe I need to get a bigger jar. But yeah, that's kind of where I keep those. So anytime I need yarn for a provisional cast-on, I've got it there. So let's see. Now next, okay, so the Christmas tree, finished that. And then what happened was on my queue was I had pulled a yarn that I picked up actually down in Peru, found it, and it's from this kind of obscure, I was actually able to find information on the yarn online. I'm trying to remember, Inca Sign was the name of it. I have some more of their yarn of a different variety in my stash. But I had one skein of this, and it wasn't labeled, but then I found out later what it was, and it's called Sathiri, and it's like a 100% alpaca, and I decided to knit this. It's called the BUN, bun hat, but that's basically bottom up, oh gosh, it's a bottom up, and now I'm drawing a blank on what the N part of the name is, and I'll look at it and go, oh, that's it. This is by Andy Oldtrout, which obviously is a pseudonym or a fun name for somebody who's designed this pattern. But it's a bottom-up neck flap. So I like the idea of having a neck flap, and it would use a bit more of the yarn this way too. And in reality, the neck flap's really nicely constructed. So it's got a nice, you see the curve at the bottom edge here, and it curves up into the main part of the hat. You'll see a couple strands hanging out where I haven't completely woven those in yet, but they've been partially woven in. And so yeah, it produces a very nice edge. Looks, you know, problem with some of these hats is the edges look a little unfinished. And this one turned out really well. And so I'm gonna put this on. It's a little loose for me, but I kind of like that because then it doesn't mush down my hair quite as much. But it really does a good job of covering my ears. So it turned out really nice. And because it's alpaca, it's incredibly soft. And my husband tried it on and liked it a ton too. Now he doesn't care for this color, so this is going to be mine for when the weather calls for it. See if I can straighten up a little bit there. But yeah, it turned out really neat, super easy pattern, and it's a free pattern as well and stuff. So I really highly recommend it. Bulky weight, easy to knit. And again, I finished this in a day very easily. And there's a great picture, I mean, I'll put it up there, of my husband wearing this hat. And as soon as he put it on, the first thing he did was he folded up that back flap on it. And it's kind of like, oh, that looks great. So it turned out, he's kind of got a bit of a good sense of style for sure. But yeah, it turned out really neat. So it's super soft, super squishy, super comfy, and just an easy knit. And it was a fun, quick knit for August. So that's it for finished objects. Now, the next thing will be knits in progress. And so I continue to cry uncle on my husband's motorcycle sweater. That will still be waiting until the weather gets cooler, I think. And I build up the appropriate motivation for it. And then, so what I did do was, I think folks who've been here before have heard me talk about this. This one is the Wednesday sweater by Petite Knit. And I'm working on this in parallel with my friend Lavon. And so she's knitting it in the very same yarn, and it's turning out really nice. We're using a bulky weight yarn. I believe in the original pattern calls for using 2 strands together. Let's take a look at that really quick. Yes, it calls for worsted and lace held together and treated as a bulky. we just got a bulky yarn, and this is our yarn that we're using is a Cascade yarn, Eco Plus Peruvian tones. So it has this kind of marled look to it. And so I think the last time I showed this, I was partway down the body, and my goal was to make it the same length as a sweatshirt that I have. And so what I did was I finished the bottom edge of this. I'm letting Lavon catch up with me now so I can show her how to do the split hem. And this will look, I think, a little loose. I'll probably have to do something to tidy up that split there because I feel like the stitches always get loose at that point. But you have the split hem, and the hem on the back is just that little, like a 1/4 inch longer than the hem on the front. And it's 4 inches long and then 4 1/4 inches long. And then the edge of the hem itself is an Italian bind off, or a tubular bind off. So it has that look like the stitches just roll over the edge, which always looks really, really good. It's a little fiddly, takes some getting used to, and you have to, depending on your taste, you have to knit some preparation rows for it. The reason why they call it a tubular bind off is when you work those extra rows, you're slipping half the stitches. So it's almost as if you're working 2 layers of fabric at that point, and then you're bringing them together by doing the hand kind of grafting of the two, the back and the front together. And so that's why they call it a tubular bind off. But it always has such a nice, in general, I feel like it's always worth the bother. And I like the tubular cast-ons too. But let me give this a try on. My goal all along has been to mimic the fit of one of my favorite sweatshirts. And I think it's doing really well on that front. There we go. Yeah, you see I've got a nice amount of ease there. And this length, let's see if I can step back a little bit. Yep, you can see I've got just enough length. It's right down. It's a little ways below my hip bone, maybe about 5 inches below my hip bone. Let's see, I move my chair a little bit. Yep, there we go. Ta-da! And so I think it turned out, I'll make sure I don't have this chair roll out from under me. All right, there we go. But yeah, I'm really happy with it. It's fitting exactly the way I was hoping it would fit. So all I'm down to is doing the sleeves and the neck, and doing some blocking. And blocking in this case will probably just be giving it a wash and then just spreading it out, not stretching it out, but kind of forming it into the dimensions that I was going for, you know, just kind of patting it down and letting it, probably won't involve any pins at all. But yeah, so it's turned out very nice and very simple pattern. And if you're doing it in one continuous shot, this I think could be a pretty quick knit, and it'll be cool. So at some point, Lavon and I will have matching sweaters. Hers is kind of a salmon reddish color versus my purple. And hers looks just as good as mine, so it's really turning out nice. So good progress there. Next step will be to put on the sleeves, and then we'll do the neck, and we'll see where we go from there. All right, now the next thing is, my little cat stuffy. So because I was working on a bunch of little small projects this month, this did not get as much attention as I would like, but I'm very close to finishing the body. So let me hold it actually upright here. This area that's already stuffed will be the head. And then I'll put a little cat face on here, and I'll sew down the corners for ears. This body, I've got about 8 more rows to go, and then I'm going to fill up this body with a pouch of catnip and a little bit of stuffing to fill that up. And then I'm going to knit these 2 layers, the inner and outer layer, together to seal that up, and then start legs. The legs will be exactly half the width of the body and just straight down, 2 legs, and they'll probably maybe about the same length as the body. Same thing, I'm going to pick up arms out of each side, and then out of the back I'll pick up a little tail. and everything, and I'll get that done and get that down to my sons for their cats. And then I'm going to demand photographs of the cats laying on this catnip toy, because my idea is there'll be an opportunity for some very funny shots of the cats kind of cuddling up with their with their little cat Stuffy. But this is a self-drafted pattern, and all the details are in the project. There's a photograph of my original sketch, and then I have a spreadsheet that says all of the dimensions for this, and I'm doing it in a fingering yarn. I don't think there's any limitation. It'd just end up bigger if you did it in thicker yarn and stuff. But yeah, it's turning out very nice. And so I think once I get the body done and get that stuff, the rest of it, the 2 legs and arms, will go pretty fast, and the tail. And get that done. Hope to get that done before the end of September. So yeah. And this is Mandy's Making Yarn. This is her marled non-superwash fingering that she has in her shop, which is really nice to work with. I like it. All right, so there's that. And then, let's scroll this up. Okay, the next one, actually I think I have it hanging back here. Let's see if I'm talented and I can get it off of there. Yep. This is the Novice Slipover. This is another petite knit pattern. And again, other things have been pulling my attention away from this, but I should get this started in earnest now, which reminds me, while I'm thinking about it, let me put in here, one of the things I want to talk about is some knitting retreats that I'll be going to in September and October. But, so yeah, I don't think this is really any further than it was the last time. This is the back. Let's turn it, that's it up. And it's basically a mohair and a DK weight yarn. This is a Madeline Tosh, I think, work sport, but it really works up as a DK. So it's a strand of DK and a strand of mohair, and the mohair is from Drops. Drops. They're Kid Silk mohair, and so I think the look has been really nice. Again, I almost feel like it has a pearly kind of sheen to it, and so this is just a slip over. And so once I actually give some real attention to this, it should move pretty fast. So I got to get back on this one. I think one of the things that's been appealing to me is working in the round and just doing knit stitches. So this one right now, what they do is it knits from the shoulders on the back down to the beginning of the, to the end of the arms, to where it joins. Then you have to pick up the front and work it down. And so you end up doing a lot of purling. Once you join the front and the back, then you're knitting in the round. The Wednesday sweater is the same, exactly the same, very similar deal in that you're definitely doing some knitting back and forth, and so you're doing some purls on the earlier part of it. And this is another one of those Stitching Plaza bags. This one was actually, I got as part of a Christmas set from, I'll forget the name. It was it Twisted Knits? I'll link it below, but she had a great Christmas set with a great Christmas yarn and this bag as a set, and it turned out really nice. I was very happy with it, and the yarn knit up super nice. It was really nice quality yarn as well, and made a great pair of socks with it. And again, Stitching Plaza bags I really like as well. So that's there. Not a whole lot of progress on that. And then, was it the other items that are in progress? Oh yes, okay. So this is actually a half object. I did not show it in the finished objects because I haven't finished the other one yet. But I was participating in the Very Berry Mystery Knit Along, and here you go. This is the strawberry flavor. And so it's a really neat pattern in that it's kind of a choose your own adventure kind of thing, where you pick the textures that you put in the different parts, what type of heel that you put on there, even the texture on the top of the toe, and even like how these top areas finish off. So this one was the strawberry flavor. So you can see there's little pearl bumps on the top of the toe. And then you see this kind of a lace, sort of a lace work pattern. It probably doesn't show as well as it might, but they're actually strawberry shaped, if you can see that. Yep. And so it produces a very nice lace pattern. And then there's the gusset here. And then this heel, Yucca Knits is the person who did this pattern, this mystery knit along. This one was called the granola heel. So I decided to do that. And I think it looked really, it looks crunchy. It turned out really nice. Same thing on the back. I've got the pearl bumps on the back that you can see. And then the strawberry lace pattern. And then up here at the top, it kind of verges into this twisted 1x1 rib with these nice details here on the front and the back, and then ends with a twisted rib up here on the top. And then the finishing cast off is the, if you've done these, where you knit a stitch, and then knit the 2 stitches, pass them back over, knit them through the back of the loop, knit another stitch, pass those 2 back, knit them through the back of the loop. And it produces a reasonably stretchy cast off there. So it actually turned out really nice. I've got the second one up to about here. And so I'll work on finishing that off, but very happy with the pattern. I think it turned out really nice. And this is Coats & Co. yarn that I'm really happy with. I got this through a Jimmy Bean's Wool summer, was it not summer, but last half of the year they were doing a sock yarn every month, and this was one of the yarns that came from that. Coats & Co. is out of Cincinnati, and I always like supporting local dyers, and so this is another one that I really like. And this yarn was very nice to work with. And so it's all documented in the pattern in my project. But yeah, I'd recommend the pattern because it was so neat. You can see in finished pictures of the pattern, there are so many varieties that you could come up with out of the pattern, out of the different options she made available. So it was a great, not only was it a fun mystery knit along, but it was a really neat one because it was kind of a choose your own adventure approach, which was a lot of fun. So that was really a great one to do, and I'll set that one there. And then, yes. So then I will admit to having a little bit of cast on itis. And I wanted to cast on a couple of the other projects that were in my queue. And all of the, let's see, a lot of these, like the Cat Stuffy and the Novice Slipover, and now this one that I'm going to show, those were all Yarn Randomizer projects. So this was a Yarn Randomizer project that used a Dream in Color yarn called Lamb, which I got at Gage down in Austin, Texas, when I was visiting my sons. And I also picked up at Gage this Ito mohair here. And so combining these together, I think these go together really well. There's a hint of this brown in little segments of this kind of greenish brown, which I think makes them go together really well. So I had found a sweater pattern very similar to the ranunculus, that kind of thing, slightly different pattern along the top, and it was called When by the Lake. And I did like the look of it, and I thought I'd just give it a try. And so I will show you here how this is turning out. And I think the two yarns are combining very nicely. And you can see what they have going on here is these slip stitches, and then they have an eyelet round between rows of these slip stitches with the yarn slipped in the front. And I'm knitting this on size 10.5. Any normal person would be knitting this on size 10. And I think it's looking absolutely lovely. And I love the little bits of darker color kind of cropping up there every so often, but I have a problem. So in the instructions, there are some short rows on the back, and I executed them as described in the pattern. And I can't tell you how many times I've reread it to make sure I didn't misunderstand. And so what I ended up getting was this wedge in the back, and it's so I think you can notice that there's a little bit of kind of a pucker, almost like a heel, you know, like when you do short rows for a heel at the center middle of the back. And I think fundamentally there's some mistake, I believe, in the instructions about how far you should go back and forth as you're doing these short rows. And so I've sent a question to the author of the pattern to try to understand that. So I'm hoping to get an answer from her soon, but I'm not going to let that hold me up. So unfortunately, I wanted you to see this because it's one of these things where as soon as I noticed it doing that, I should have stopped right then and asked about it. But you know how it is. You're working on something, you're flying through it, and you're thinking, oh, that'll block out. Now, it might block out, but I know it's not right. And the reason I know it's not right is I looked at photographs in the pattern, and you can see in the photographs, and I'll put one over here, you can see in the photographs that this wedge on the back that you see here extends from shoulder to shoulder across the back. So it's not limited to like the middle third of the back, it's actually all the way across. And so I played around with the numbers a little bit and came up with an approach that I think will replicate what I see in the pictures of the pattern a bit better. So unfortunately, I'm going to be ripping this out back to the start of the short rows. So I'll have to say goodbye to this part of it and redo it. But I have to say, I'm very excited about knitting this. I think it looks great, and I can't wait to have a sweater out of it. So lesson learned, when you start having doubts like that, you know, it's better to stop sooner. But the bottom line is I can always rip it back and redo it. And that's what's going to end up happening here. All right. And then there should be one more. Okay. And it's up on the wall here. So let me bring that down. Okay. You like that? I love this bag. So I picked this up from Stolen Minutes. She's, again, a local maker. She's out of, I think, Cincinnati or that area, Centerville, Dayton, Ohio area. Not Cincinnati, Dayton, near Dayton, Ohio. And so I picked this up when she put this out on pre-order and got it. And it's a nice big bag. And so I have it housing my On the Spice Market project. This is Melanie Berg's pattern, and I'm using, it's mainly, and I think this might be another local dyer. You're going to see how biased I am. So it is Unplanned Peacock is the yarn dyer, and I'm using a set of minis that they had, and I'll put a picture of the order I'm going to use them in up here. And I'm going to be using, the main color is going to be this black, basically a dark yarn. So it's going to be a little different than a lot of the On the Spice Markets. A lot of them are knitted with light colors. But I have got the first section done. I believe, let's see, this would be the front. So this is the very start of the very beginning of it. So this is the first section. And it's starting with the only variegated yarn that's in this set. I'm getting ready to do some of the black and then transition to the next color. But it's a really nice pattern. And one of the things I'm doing, there was a recommendation if you have a concern of this edge being binding, of doing a yarn over on the wrong side after the first stitch and then dropping that yarn over on the way back. And that's working out really nicely. And so just started, just begun. And so I'll make some more progress on this, and really happy with the colors. And you'll see the color selection in the order that I'm going to do. And so it'll be interesting to see how that turns out on such a dark background. So I'm thinking it'll be a nice dramatic scarf with some interesting colorways in there and everything. And that's it for my projects that are on the needles. And actually, my knitting queue has only 3 items in it right now. I think yes, it's 2. Was it a pair of socks with 1 yarn, and then another shawl, actually, and I had already talked about those previous episode that I'd added to the list. Now, it's time to go over, let's see, Tosh Vintage. You know what? I was supposed to have, I do have one acquisition, and I'm trying to think about where it's at. My preparations have been foiled. Oh my goodness. and it is definitely over there somewhere. But basically, I did do a little field trip to 614 Knit Studio, local yarn shop in Columbus, with my friend Levon, and we actually shopped through the whole shop. And this was during their there's a sort of a yarn crawl, Midwestern yarn crawl thing right now. It's during that time, and so we went there, and I could not resist picking up a ball of worsted yarn, and so let me go get that. Right. I'm back. And so I picked up some Madelinetosh vintage, so it's a worsted yarn, and it's a one of a kind, but I really did like this kind of rich, warm, kind of tan brown with the speckles all over it. I thought this would make, you know, lovely, I'm going to say it, my favorite hat, my 1898 hat. I thought this would make a great 1898 hat. I am like a broken record with that pattern, I know, but couldn't resist it. So this goes into layaway for me. So those who haven't been watching up until now, basically, in order to put yarn into the available yarn in my stash, I have to use up twice as much yardage to make it available. And so I've got a handful of different yarns. I've purchased way more yarn than I should have this year. And so I've got a handful of yarns where I need to use up yardage to fold them into my rotation, and to give them assign them a random number and put them in my bucket of chips there so they can be chosen. But so this one's in layaway, and so for any of my stash, if you look, if it says in layaway, it's basically not available for me to knit with yet. So it's part of the game I play with yarn. But I did love this colorway and couldn't leave it there. So it ended up coming along with me. So that's my only acquisition. And so the other things that went on were I made a couple more, or had my husband pick a couple more chips out of the box of wooden chips, and he came up with a couple really nice picks. So let's get down to the first one. This is yarn number 23. This is the 23rd pick for the year, and this is Fleece Artist. I think it's a cottage, organic cottage socks. And this is actually one of the things I was noticing about this is it feels like a lot of yarn, and it is more than usual. It is 115 grams of yarn instead of 100 grams. And so there's some extra length. There's more yarn than you usually get in a skein here, but oh, look at those, that blue and purple combination. Really nice. And this is absolutely going to be a pair of socks. And so my plan is to use a pattern that I've used before for socks. It's the Ringwood sock pattern. I think it's Tess Young might be the maker. It'll be linked below. And I really like the pattern because it is, you can do it, it's got a really nice plain texture to it, and it's a great, you know, just regular sock. And I'm a big fan of a heel flap and gusset. If it's not heel flap and gusset, I like a Flegel heel, which I don't think I've knit one with a Flegel heel since I started this podcast, but that's one of my other favorites. And that actually gives me an idea. You know, I have a pair of worsted socks that have a really nice Flegel heel that would look really good in this as well. All right, so this is going to definitely be a pair of socks. I might or might not put the texture in there. So what I do is I use that Ringwood sock pattern to make plain socks or put the texture in there. And so maybe I'll put the texture in there, but it'll be interesting to see how that knits, how this knits up for a pair of socks, but it feels great. And again, it's a nice big skein of yarn, and so I'll be able to make a nice long pair of socks. I wanted to show you when I do make socks, and people talk about length that they do a lot. My standard thing when I make a pair of socks, and you will laugh at this being a standard, is when I make a pair of socks, my preference is that when you fold them at the heel, that the leg and the toe come to the kind of same length. They just fold in half at the heel. And so that way they store very nicely in my sock drawer. So it's a little bit arbitrary, but it works out. And being that I wear a size 11 shoe, it works out pretty well for me. Okay, now, so pick number 23, the Fleece Artist, will become a pair of socks, and so I've added that to my queue. Now the next one I did not add to my queue yet because I definitely wanted to talk about it here first. So the next pick 24 for the year, is this and that. And it's these. I have these. If you don't know about Mandy's Makings on Etsy, she has a really nice shop and she has some really nice yarns that she dyes. And so these, there is one entry she has where you buy it and you get basically two sock sets, 250-gram skeins. So this is 4 50-gram skeins tools, like 2 skeins of yarn, but they're divided up like this. And the idea is they're called share a pair. And the idea is you would use it and maybe you'd have a friend and you'd both knit a pair of socks with the same yarn. And I have done that with a share a pair set before with my friend Levon and made a pair of socks that way. But this obviously I haven't shared. And I really liked this colorway, this neon green with the purples. And so this is called Silly Monsters. I think there may still be some of this in her shop. But I really like these colorways. And so when my husband pulled the latest chip number 24, for the 24th pick for the year, it picked this yarn out. And so I was like, what to do with this yarn? What to do with this yarn? You know, and I have a tendency to want to make sweaters out of things if I can. Now this is 2 skeins of fingering. You know, unless I combined it with some kind of mohair, I would not be able to really come out of this with a sweater. You might be able to knit a tank top. I ain't knitting any. There's no tank tops are coming out off my needles unless I'm making them for somebody else, because I'm not wearing that. I think they look lovely. People look awesome in them and stuff, but I won't be knitting those because I don't think they'll look good on me. But this, oh, I really think this would make a great sweater. And so what I did was, and this is the real advantage to having an extensive stash, is that sometimes you have stuff, you can look through your palette of colors and yarns and everything else and find something that is a perfect companion for some yarns. So what I have is here is I have some Lorna's Laces, another fingering yarn. And this color is Grapevine. It's their shepherd. It's the shepherd sock. And I think that this will make a great, see how well it matches the purple that's in this variegated yarn. And I thought, now there is a potential for a sweater. Combined, all of these together give me between 12 and 1300 yards of yarn, which would be enough for a fingering weight sweater. And so there was a really great sweater I saw made by the same person who made this bag that I'd gone over, Stolen Minutes. She had a really nice sweater that she'd done with a bunch of minis. And I remember seeing it on a podcast that she had done with the Crazy Sock Lady. And I thought, oh my goodness, I got to find out what pattern that is. And I actually found where there was a picture of that sweater in her Instagram feed, and I asked her what pattern it was, and it turned out it was Ravello by, oh, now I'm gonna do let's check my library real quick. Gotta do brain freeze on the name of these folks, and Ravello is the name of the pattern, and it's Isabel Kramer. Who else? She has so many great sweaters, and so Ravello is sort of like a canvas. She's in the sweater pattern, she's got some striping going a certain way in that pattern, but you can certainly paint it however you want to. So I think that these combined will be great for a fingering weight sweater, and I'll kind of choose some kind of pattern for how to use the yarn. What I'll typically do is make a spreadsheet and then figure out how many stitches there are for the entire pattern, and proportion out the stitches with these different colors and figure out how I want to combine them. Maybe it's these two striped together with this on the lower, main part of the body, bottom of the sleeves. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But I'm really, really excited about doing this sweater. I think this will be so cool. So that was a really fun pick to come out of there. So that's it for all the all the stuff I've been knitting on, planning on, all that kind of stuff. Now, I had mentioned last time that I was going to talk about yarn retreats that I'm going to go to, and of course, completely spaced on doing that. And so I wanted to make a point of mentioning it this time. So in September, I'm going up to the Rocky Mountain Knitting Retreat. It's sponsored by the Basque Knitter. And I went there last year and just had an absolute blast. And that's if you are an avid knitter, if you really enjoy knitting and you haven't been to a knitting retreat, you have no idea what you're missing. Because I started going to knitting retreats, and I think in February timeframe of 2022, and became immediately addicted to the idea of going to these kinds of events. And there are a couple of different flavors of retreats. So the Rocky Mountain Knitting Retreat is one where we're together for 4 days and 3 nights, I think, or you can do a shorter 3 days and 2 nights. And they'll just a whole bunch of knitters to get together, and y'all hang out and knit and enjoy the scenery and that kind of stuff. It's in Utah, in Salt Lake City, Utah, up at a ski resort up there, and the weather is cool enough to where it feels really good to knit at that point in September in near Salt Lake City. And it's just great. You get to chat with people and knit and look at each other's stuff. Everybody's wearing their great stuff and everything. And there's a little shop that happens, and I think there's some organized activities, yoga and mindfulness and those kind of things that you can participate in if you want to. For me, it's mainly just the hanging out and knitting I really enjoy. And so I'll be going to that. Now, my husband and I go up to that about a week ahead of when the retreat happens, and we go visit some national parks up there. And then he'll get sent back home, and I'll attend the retreat for the last 4 days that I'm up there. So I'm looking forward to that. And I highly recommend it. I'm pretty sure I'll put the link below. There's probably a wait list if you're in the area or interested in anything like that. But yeah, it's really just really fun take-in. There's also Yarn Swap. You can bring yarn you're willing to trade at that as well. And then the other one that I'm going to is, and this is the first time this retreat is happening, so it's happening down in Ghost Ranch in New Mexico, and it is going to be a retreat with I think it's Selma from Little Big Knits. She's going to be there, and it's a combined knitting and hiking retreat, which is right up my alley. I love to hike. I love to walk in the woods and that kind of thing. And I've been an avid hiker in the past. My trips to Nepal and Peru all involved some pretty significant hiking on those trips. And so I'm looking forward to doing this, but also meeting Selma, because I love her Little Big Knits podcast. I watch that very consistently, and she's the one who sold me on doing a ranunculus, because I'll be honest here, when you go look at the ranunculus pattern and you see the primary picture for it, it's kind of like, it didn't seem very appealing. But when you see folks actually knit it up and wear it, it's great. It knits fast. It's a great sweater, fabulous stuff. And so she's the one who really got me into knitting, trying a ranunculus, and being super happy with the result. So I'm really looking forward to meeting her and doing some hiking and that kind of stuff. And I think, again, that one is probably sold out, but there's a wait list, so I'll link that down below as well. And so I think besides that, I've got other things I've still got to do. I've got more yarn tours to do. I've got to start my sock retrospective, figure out how many socks I'm going to cover in an episode, and a few other things to do but content should speed up a little bit compared to the hot July and August that we've had out here in the Midwest. That has kind of slowed me down a little bit on the knitting and everything, but otherwise still enjoying it. So I think that's everything, and I'll continue to pop up randomizer picks, and as I do them, as I have my husband pick out a chip from the pool. But yeah, so let me know if you have any questions, and if you please like. I hope these are kind of fun or helpful, or actually find something you're really interested in doing and everything. And I will look forward to hopefully seeing you back next time. So enjoy your knits.